Chapter 9. This chapter previews the business cycle, unemployment, and inflation. It is an important chapter as it sets the stage for the analytical presentation in later chapters. So, business cycles. They are alternating increases and decreases in economic activity over time, right? Each business cycle consists of 4 phases, as listed here: peak, recession, trial, and expansion. A peak is when business activity reaches a temporary maximum with full employment and near capacity output. A recession is a decline in total output, income, employment, and trade lasting 6 months or more. This is sometimes referred to as an economic contraction. The trough, or the trough, is the bottom of the recession period, and the expansion is when output and employment are recovering and expanding toward the full employment level. So it hits its peak, goes through a recession, trials the bottom point, expansion as it increases, hits a peak again, recession, trial, expansion, hits a peak again. This figure shows a business cycle, right? And it distinguishes the 4 phases of the business cycle. Now the duration, the strength of each phase may vary, right? Additionally, cycles vary in duration and intensity, right? Overall, in the long run, right, the trend is economic growth. Now, the United States' long-run economic growth has been interrupted by periods of instability. Uneven growth has been the pattern, with inflation often accompanying rapid growth, and declines in employment and output during periods of recession and depression. Economic shocks are unexpected events that individuals and firms may have trouble adjusting to. Prices can be inflexible downwards, which means that if total spending unexpectedly decreases and firms cannot lower prices, the firms will end up selling fewer units of product or output. The sticky prices results in slower sales, which will cause firms to cut back on production. This causes GDP to fall. Then, unemployment will fall because of the reduced demand for output, and an economic contraction will occur. Inflexible prices are thought to be a major factor in preventing the economy from quickly adjusting to economic shocks. Right? These shocks, right, are regular innovation, productivity changes, monetary factors, political events, financial instability, all of which led to the recession of 2007, right? Major innovations may trigger new investment and/or consumption spending, but these occur irregularly and unexpectedly may contribute to the variability of economic activity. Right? Examples include the computer and the internet. Additionally, changes in productivity may be a related cause. Unexpected changes in resource availability or unexpected changes in the rate of technological advances can affect productivity. Then, as the monetary authorities print more money, an inflationary boom can occur. Printing less money than what people were expecting can also trigger an output in decline, or a decline in output. Right? As the economy adjusts to political events like peace treaties or war, economic strains can occur as well. Rapid asset price increases or decreases can spill over to the general economy and cause booms and busts. The recession of 2007 was led by excessive money, overvalued real estate, and unsustainable mortgage debt. Now, most economists agree that the level of aggregate spending is important, especially the changes in spending on capital goods and consumer durables. Recall that the definition of durable goods is a good with an expected life of 3 years or more. Right? Spending on durable goods output is more volatile than non-durables and services because spending on non-durables or services often cannot be postponed. Also, durable good items such as a new automobile or a new washer and dryer are generally more expensive for households to purchase, making durable goods more valuable in times of declining income and uncertainty for households. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, right, which we've gone through numerous times now, come out with the unemployment rate. Right, as a quick review, the unemployment rate is calculated by taking a random survey of 60,000 households nationwide. The population divided into 3 groups. Group 1 consists of those under age 16 or institutionalized in this country. Right? Group 2 consists of those not in the labor force. And group 3 consists of those age 16 and over who are willing and able to work and actively seeking work. Right? So group 3 is the labor force. Right? The labor force is simply described as those who are either employed or unemployed. And to be counted as part of the labor force, you have, right? To be counted as unemployed, you have to be part of the labor force. Now, two factors cause the unemployment rate to understate actual unemployment, right? Part-time workers are counted as employed, even if they really want full-time work. Discouraged workers who want a job but are not actually seeking one are now counted as being labor force, so they are not part of the unemployment statistic as well. In 2015, over 650,000 people fell into this category of discouraged workers, right? Only 400,000 fell into this category back in 2007. Now, frictional unemployment is regarded as somewhat desirable because it indicates that there is mobility as people change or seek jobs. Frictional unemployment is usually a short-term type of unemployment. Structural unemployment occurs when certain skills become obsolete or geographic distributions of job changes. This can be a long-term type of unemployment. And then there's cyclical unemployment, right? And this is usually caused by the recession phase of the business cycle. As firms respond to insufficient demand for their goods and services, output and unemployment are reduced. Extreme unemployment during the Great Depression, right, goes up to 25% in 1933, is an example of cyclical unemployment. It is sometimes not clear which type of unemployment describes a person's unemployment circumstances. Now, full unemployment does not mean zero unemployment, but it does mean that cyclical unemployment is zero. The full employment rate is equal to the total frictional and structural unemployment because these types of unemployment are always occurring and are a natural part of the economy. The full employment rate of unemployment is also referred to as the national rate of unemployment. The natural rate is achieved when labor markets are in balance, the number of job seekers equals the number of job vacancies. As well, the natural rate of unemployment is not fixed, but depends on the demographic makeup of the labor force and the laws and the customs of the nation. Now, there's an economic cost to unemployment. The GDP gap is the difference between potential and actual GDP, where potential GDP reflects the level of GDP associated with the natural rate of unemployment. Economist Arthur Oken quantified the relationship between unemployment and GDP as follows. For every 1% of unemployment above the natural rate, a negative GDP gap of about 2% occurs. This is known as Oken's law. This means that if the country is producing below what could potentially be produced, given our resources and level of technology, right, you most likely liken this to operating inside of the PPC, right? So they're within the PPC, and it's saying how much within the PPC we're reducing our economic output. Now, unequal burdens of unemployment exist. Rates are lower for white-collar workers, right? Teenagers have the highest unemployment rates. African Americans have higher unemployment rates than whites. Rates for males and females are comparable, though females currently have a lower unemployment rate. Less educated workers, on average, have higher unemployment rates than workers with more education. The long-term, which is 15 weeks or more, unemployment rate is much lower than the overall rate, although it increased from 1.5% back in 2007 to 4.7% in 2009. And here are just some statistics on this. Right? Feel free to use this when we're looking at the discussion board for this week, talking about black unemployment. Now, severe unemployment is socially catastrophic, right? as it occurs at the individual level and then spreads throughout society. And these are some of the non-economic costs. Now, this global perspective shows the unemployment rates in 5 industrialized nations, 2004 to 2014. Compared with Italy, France, and Germany, the U.S. has had a relatively low unemployment rate in recent years. Now, this brings us to the next section of the chapter, inflation. Not all prices rise at the same rate, and some prices may stay constant while other prices fall. Reduced purchasing power means that each dollar of income will buy fewer items than before. CPI-U is the most commonly reported measure of inflation. The main index used to measure inflation is the Consumer Price Index. Right, the CPI-U, as we talked about before in one of the previous assignments, right, is the measure the media reports. It's the CPI for all urban consumers. And it's thought to cover about 87% of the population's purchasing experiences. There are other price indexes as reported by the CPI, right? The CPI-W, C, PPI. But in this numerical example, right, using CPI data for 2014, there's a price index of 236.7, and it has a price in 2013 has a price index of 233. Right, you calculate the inflation rate and find it to be 1.6% using the equation below, or equation listed here. You realize it's price of the most recent year, right? Price of the previous year divided by the price of the previous year times 100 will give you your percentage rate. And this is showing you inflation rates in the 5 industrialized nations. And you can see here, right, that the United States, the inflation rates are generally slightly higher than the other countries. And this is showing you from 1960 to 2015. Now, there's 2 types of inflation, demand pull and cost push. Demand pull inflation is a result of spending increases faster than production. It is often described as too much spending causing too few goods. Right? Demand. People want things, so they're pulling the rate with them. Now, cost push inflation. Prices rise, but output falls. Rising costs reduce profits and reduce the amount of output producers are willing to supply at the existing price levels. As a result, the economy's supply of goods and services declines and price level rises. Supply shocks have been the major source of cost-push inflation. These typically occur with dramatic increases in the price of raw materials or energy. So increasing costs push inflation to go up with it. Now, it is difficult to distinguish between the causes of inflation. Although cost push will die out in a recession if spending does not also rise, because food like oranges and energy products like gasoline prices are subject to wide swings that can be temporary in nature. The BLS also reports the core CPI, which is the CPI less food and energy. The policymakers are mainly interested in whether the underlying core CPI is rising and how quickly. Based on that analysis, they may take measures to try and stop it. Now, nominal income is the number of dollars received as wages, rent, interest, or profits. Real income refers to the purchasing power of your income. How much can you actually purchase with your income? Anticipated inflation is much less harmful than unanticipated inflation. Right? Real income can decrease even with an increase in nominal income if the inflation rate is higher than the increase in nominal income. So say you get a raise this year. However, if your raise doesn't even match the level of inflation, it comes out to be that you have less purchasing power than you did the previous year. So ideally what would happen is you would receive a raise equal to or greater than the inflation, which would increase your overall purchasing power. Now, harm from unanticipated inflation causes real incomes and wealth to be redistributed. Were the inflation to be expected, people could plan ahead for it. Those expecting inflation may be able to adjust their work or spending activities to avoid or lessen the effects. Unanticipated inflation has stronger impacts, right? Fixed income groups will be hurt most because the real income suffers. The nominal income does not rise with prices. Savers will be hurt by unanticipated inflation because interest rates may not cover the cost of inflation. Their savings will lose purchasing power. Creditors and lenders can be harmed by unanticipated inflation. Interest on payments received may be less than the inflation rate, and low payments will have less purchasing power. If you have money in the bank right now, and you're making 1% interest on the money in the bank, and yet inflation is at 2%, it means you're losing money, right? The value of that money for purchasing power every single year. You want to ensure that your savings are making more than the rate of inflation so that you're actually accumulating income. Now, if inflation is anticipated, the effects of inflation may be less severe, since wage and pension contracts may have inflation causes, such as cost of living adjustments, COLAs, built in, and interest rates will be high enough to cover the cost of inflation to savers and lenders. Debtors or borrowers can be helped because interest payments may be less than the inflation rate. So borrowers receive dear money and they're paying back cheap dollars. Now, if inflation is anticipated, individuals can plan ahead, mitigating the effects of inflation. An inflation premium, right, is the amount that the interest rate is raised to cover effects of anticipated inflation. And the real interest rate is defined as the nominal rate minus the inflation premium. Now, in the past, deflation has been as much of a problem as inflation. For example, 1930s depression was a period of declining prices and wages. The effects of deflation, right, are reversed to those of inflation. Many families are simultaneously helped and hurt by inflation because they are borrowers and earners and savers. Effects of inflation are arbitrary in terms of individuals who will benefit and individuals who are harmed, regardless of society's goals. Cost-push inflation, where resource prices rise unexpectedly, could cause both output and unemployment to decline. Real income falls, right? Mild inflation, less than 3%, has uncertain effects. It may be a healthy byproduct of a prosperous economy, or may have an undesirable impact on real economy. Now, there is also a danger of creeping inflation turning into hyperinflation, which can cause speculation, reckless spending, and even more inflation. Right? The Zimbabwe experience is interesting. The government of Zimbabwe faces a wide variety of difficult economic problems as it struggles with sustainable fiscal deficit, right? An overvalued official exchange rate, hyperinflation, bare store shelves. Its 1998 to 2002 involvement in the war in the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo, drained hundreds of millions of dollars from the economy. The government's Land Before program, characterized by chaos and violence, has badly damaged the commercial farming sector. Right. The EU and the US provide food aid on humanitarian grounds. Badly needed support from the International Monetary Fund or the IMF has been suspended because of the government arrears and past loans, not paying them, and their unwillingness to enact reforms that would stabilize the economy. Right, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe routinely prints money to fund the budget deficit, causing the official annual inflation rate to rise from 32% in 1998, 133% in 2004, 585% in 2005, over 1,000% in 2006, and 26,000% in November 2007. Right? And it's actually up to 11.2 million% in 2008. Meanwhile, the official exchange rate fell from approximately 1 Zimbabwean dollar per US dollar in 2003 to 30,000 US dollars in September 2007. Now, economists have been puzzled that the unemployment numbers have remained high in spite of the strengthening economy as the country recovers from the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. Right, but since then, the structure of the unemployment itself has changed. The number of full-time employees is down, while part-time employment is up. This skews the unemployment rate as all jobs are counted. More troubling is the fact that most of the jobs went to older workers, leaving the younger workers struggling to find work. Job growth has also not kept up with population growth, leading to a decline in the employment population ratio. So even though employment numbers have slowly declined, it's not showing that we're in the healthiest economic situation.